This is the first step in the first stage. This is why it's great being in a big city and not being a Phoenix or not being Cleveland, because that's all they could bank on. They can't bank on a free agent coming in, you know. So the Knicks have options now. They have assets. They have cap space. They don't necessarily have a great young player. I mean, Kevin Knox, he didn't have the greatest rookie season. I'm a big fan of Mitch Robinson, but that's still even potential. So just be patient. It's okay. Let's see what Scott Perry and the Knicks brass can do as far as the asset they have accumulated. And, you know, let's obviously, Kevin Durant, when that comes around, if we have a show around July 8th, July 9th, and we get no Kevin Durant, then the calm hill, he will have disappeared by then. So we'll see what happens around that time. That's what I'm banking on.
Well, we're going to have you back on around free agency to get your take on that hill. Thank you so much for your patience tonight, for joining the show. Ben and I appreciate it. And for Knicks fans, sorry it didn't work out. Zion Williamson will not be coming to the Garden, but we'll see what happens in free agency. Hill, thanks again, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Good talking to you.
All right, Benjamin. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. Nitty-gritty. I don't know. I am so warped by this draft lottery right now. I cannot believe the Pelicans got the number 1 pick, dude.
I mean, there's the David Griffin just golden touch here. I mean, I think you gotta think that he just has some supernatural powers, Jason. I mean, we saw what he did with the Cavaliers, and the fact that during their time he managed to do some pretty amazing things to get everything kind of sorted out, and now he comes to the Pelicans, and suddenly, you know, they win the lottery, and now there's a question of, you know, will the Pelicans be able to keep Anthony Davis, which I think is the biggest thing that comes out of this, because suddenly you've got 3 blue chip guys on this team, basically. And, you know, one of the things that's kind of an underrated storyline is that the Pelicans actually have cap room this summer, too. If Julius Randle opts out of his deal, which I expect that he very well might, given that he's only getting paid $9 million and he had a pretty good year, they'll have about $20 million in cap space, not including what they'll have to pay to Zion. I mean, they could add a real player there and then team Holiday, Davis, Williamson. They'll still have Solomon Hill on the books, which is unfortunate, but they might be able to get off his contract since it is expiring. I mean, if they were to get off his contract and Etuan Moore, I mean, they'd pretty much have just a blank roster around those 3 guys, which is not a bad place to start, Jason. And you got to wonder if the Pelicans might have a chance to keep Davis after all.
I don't know about that, Ben. I know you were prepping for the show, but tweets have already come out from Shams that said Anthony Davis is still hell-bent on getting out of New Orleans. David Griffin, in the interview after they won the number 1 pick, was saying, well, yeah, he's on the roster right now, but we have a lot of work to do. And guess what, Ben? It is not all sunshine and rainbows in the Big Easy, because Zion Williamson did not look thrilled when ESPN interviewed him once the Pelicans got the number 1 pick. Rumor has it he was rooting to go to the Knicks. They had a 14% chance at the number 1 pick. They didn't get it. So you could have a cranky young kid in Zion Williamson and Anthony Davis still out the door. And guess what? The Lakers moving up in this lottery to number 4, that's another trade chip that Rob Pelinka and whoever else in that front office is running the show has in their back pocket. So they could still trade Davis to the Lakers for a package including Ingram, Kuzma, Hart, Ball, and this number 4 pick. I mean, that's still a hell of a return for the Pelicans. If they can get a crop of young players that were unwanted in Los Angeles, get a disgruntled Davis out the door, and put all those young pieces around Zion, you have a young, budding playoff team with potential in New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, to be honest with you, I'm not sure at this point if that is what I would. I mean, the thing that's interesting about them winning the lottery is that it felt like if they didn't win the lottery, the most valuable trade chip would be Zion Williamson. They would be on the table. I think you need a real blue chipper if you're trading Davis. I feel like that's what the Pelicans need to look for here. And I do wonder, you know, if that presents any other options. I mean, we can see, but, you know, ultimately the Grizzlies aren't going to make They're not going to make a trade, and it seems unlikely that the Knicks have enough without Zion. So it's interesting to me to see now where the Pelicans go because, I'm not sure. I like the Lakers deal almost more than what the Celtics can offer with the way that Tatum's been playing. But I'm not sure that either of those teams have a real blue chipper. I'm not sure anymore with Tatum. I'm not sure he's going to become, an all NBA type player. So I don't know. I mean,
Well,
I think
he didn't sacrifice as much as Terry Rozier did. So I mean that goes without saying.
I'm just really curious to see. I mean, I almost wonder if there's going to be a team that kind of comes out of the woodwork here to jump into the into the Davis sweepstakes. They got Zion on the brain because it feels like there's just an opening. I just don't see an offer now that would absolutely blow them away. I mean, if the Lakers had won the lottery, for sure, you take Zion and one or two of those guys. But now you do have to wonder if a contender was to trade something. If a team with some real pieces was to come into this, imagining a team that's, wants that last piece. Would a team like the Sixers or the Raptors or the Bucks or the Warriors or the Nuggets or the Blazers, would one of them give up a key piece to get Davis? Would they roll the dice the way that the Raptors just did here with Kawhi Leonard? And you have to wonder if that's a possibility now because, I mean, Jason Tatum didn't really acquit himself well. And I feel like, I don't know, Jason, I mean, don't you feel like Kyrie Irving, I mean, this is a good segue to the Celtics series, but I feel like with that loss, that's Kyrie Irving out the door.
Yeah. I mean, Kyrie Irving is, I think, pretty much gone. I think Terry Rozier is pretty much gone. Before we do get into the Celtics, though, do you have anything on the Bulls picking at 7? A little Ben's Bulls blah, or are you kind of just meh on it?
I mean, again, I felt like if the Bulls didn't get one of those
You're
top
starting to sound
3 or
like
4,
Hill plays for the Knicks. Did you know that?
Well, I'll just say this. I think there was 3 or 4 guys at the top who I felt pretty good about. And after that, I think there's guys who are probably going to top out as starters or role player type guys. Probably aren't going to be all-stars, but they have there's some higher ceiling guys like Bull is a nice dice roll type player. I don't think the Bulls are going to be in that area, but I think, would a guy like DeAndre Hunter or, I think Jarrett Culver or Cam Reddish would be potentially nice fits for the Bulls. They could really use a wing. They could really use some shooting. They could really, really use some perimeter defense. So I think a guy like Culver might be a really interesting fit with them. Again, I'm not super optimistic regardless because the Bulls probably have the worst coach in the NBA, which is a bit of a bummer because he just got an extension. So I'm just not sure. But, I mean, I think it's not the end of the world. If you weren't going to win the lottery this year, I think it's one of those lotteries where you almost say, all right, well, if we don't have number 1, it's not the end of the world not to have number 2 or number 3.
Well, I'm just going to give you one quick thing before we move on. Shout out to the Hawks. 2 top 10 picks. I mean, they could be a dark horse trade candidate for the Pelicans. You got 2 top 10 picks to pair with Zion, send Anthony Davis out to Atlanta to play with Trae Young. I mean, hey, you never know what could happen there. But that's enough on the draft lottery for now, Ben. We have a lot to get to. We had 4 amazing playoff series. Well, 3 amazing playoff series, and then you have the Celtics and the Bucks, which is what we'll start with. But these playoff series are incredible to watch. And I'm just going to call myself Jay Stradamus because I had all 4 series picked correctly, including 2 of them by game. I called the Raptors in 7, so did Kawhi Leonard, and I called the Blazers in 7. I had the Warriors in 7. They got it done in 6. We'll have a lot more on that later. And the Bucks in 6. You got 3 of the series right, none of the games. But, hey, 3 of our 4 teams are moving on, so we should go play the lotto.
Yeah, I mean, the one I missed was obviously the Sixers, which, we'll get to that in a second. I mean, I think the biggest surprise for me was just how the Bucks handled the Celtics. That, to me, was the most surprising thing. To be honest, as I said to you when we did the preview, I said, some level, I think the Raptors are a better team on paper than the Sixers are, but I just don't trust them. And to be honest, it kind of bore itself out over that series that I still didn't trust them. I mean, it took an amazing play by Kawhi Leonard to get there. But on the other hand, I think the Celtics-Bucks series, I was very surprised at how easily the Celtics just rolled over. I thought that was going to be a real series. I thought the Celtics were going to give them a tough time, and the Bucks just rolled them. And I think it says two things, Jason, for the future, I guess I should say. I think one of them is that I think the Bucks might be a little better than I realized. And they obviously were great in the regular season, but I wasn't sure how that was going to carry over to the playoffs. I think they're for real, and I think it just speaks to the fact that the Celtics were the team that they were during the regular season.
Well, they started off hot, 5-0, including a win on the road in Milwaukee. And I think it was more the Bucks playing down to their competition because Giannis said before the series, and Game 1 obviously comes out the day this podcast comes out, but he said, listen, you lose Game 1 to the Celtics, you're fine. You lose Game 1 at home to the Toronto Raptors, it's looking like a completely different series. So that's Giannis already admitting that he didn't really have to take it up too many notches in order for the Bucks, who were much deeper and playing as a cohesive unit than the Celtics ever were. I mean, you saw Terry Rozier, especially his comments this week that he made about how the sacrifices he made, and if the Celtics are running it back, he may not want to be a part of it. I mean, you have to really feel for Brad Stevens because that locker room was a mess. You had Kyrie Irving's antics, Gordon Hayward struggling to get healthy. You had Rozier and Tatum and Brown all playing uneven minutes. You had Marcus Smart hurt. I mean, when you look back on it, Ben, the Celtics were really no match for the Bucks at all in the series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think part of it too was that, you know, there were a lot of guys who really stepped up last year. And, you know, I think it's also safe to say that they got a little lucky. I mean, the Bucks were coached by Jason Kidd, who was, you know, just didn't do a very good job, quite frankly. And so they managed to kind of eke through that series. They didn't have the spacing, so Giannis wasn't able to do everything he can. They made it through there. And then the Sixers, I mean, the Sixers kind of choked on some level, and they made it against, you know, that Cavaliers team. But even the Cavaliers last year, you know, I think the Cavaliers might have been the fourth or fifth best team this year had they run everything back. I don't think they would have even had a chance to win the conference this year. So I also think it speaks to the fact that the conference was better, and I think the Celtics just, they weren't as good as they looked on paper. Gordon Hayward was never the same player. Al Horford was a half step slower. Irving was great, but he's still a defensive liability at points, and that gives you a soft spot. Where last year, I think the one advantage the Celtics had was that they were really didn't have anywhere you could attack on defense. And I think that made it tough for these teams because in the playoffs, one of the things is that teams find your weakness and they just exploit it over and over again. And the Celtics didn't have a defensive weak spot last year. And obviously this year they do. And I think that made a big difference. And then there's the fact, too, that quite frankly, Hayward's always been an underrated defender, and he just wasn't that guy this season. And I think that really hurt them, too.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to discuss the Celtics in the offseason. I think the Bucks are going to be ready. You want playoff Giannis? You're about to get him. I know you were calling for a higher usage rate for him to play more minutes. I think you'll get that. Kawhi versus Giannis is going to be one of the best one-on-one matchups in the postseason. But we have to move on to these Sixers-Raptors series. That Kawhi shot, I think, one of the best shots in NBA history. Do you agree?
I mean, it was iconic, and it was just an amazing shot by Kawhi, and it kind of summarized that series, how close that whole series was, and the fact that Kawhi hit that shot was also very emblematic because, let's be honest, Jason, if you look back at this series, Kawhi did not get that much help. And that was, let's just say it right now, that shot saved his potential Toronto career. If they lose to the Sixers in that game, and if it went to overtime, anything's possible, Kawhi's gone. I mean, I'm not going to try to overreact and play Nostradamus, but, you know what? If they lose in that second round to a team like the Sixers, I don't